And we are recording. Hi, everybody. This is David P. France, and I'm coming to you from Basel, Switzerland. And before we get started, I want to make sure that everyone likes the video, shares the video, and also, how do you say, likes the video, shares the video, and forward the videos to your friends and family, your colleagues. We are doing very well. We're now at, I think, interview 34, number 34.
Wow.
Right. And
congratulations.
Today, thank you, Lea. Today we have Lea Kraemer. This is her second time being interviewed. And Lea and I have known each other for a very, very long time, just so you know, for those who don't know. She is a yoga therapist, a yoga teacher, an instructor, and she just knows a lot of stuff, right? I mean, before we got started, we were talking and going on and on. We covered so many different topics. We're going to try to recreate, in some respect, some of the things that we talked about before we started. So, Lea, tell us, how are you doing? You're coming to us from Los Angeles, is that correct?
Right now, I'm in Pasadena, California, and this community still is very much social distancing, wearing masks in the middle of a pandemic. There's a lot of concern about that. And then at the same time in Pasadena, we're very lucky. We have a lot of space. People are out running. People are out walking. People are beginning to go back to restaurants, socially distanced. So I'm experiencing sort of every reaction simultaneously is happening out there. Some people are very confused, very afraid. A lot of people healing if they've had COVID or even other conditions during this time. And then at the same time, the community really coming together, creating beautiful spaces, new projects, and there's a tone of great hopefulness and great recreation of our world right now.
Mm-hmm. That's good. We talked earlier about fear, right? And I can tell you right now, from in Basel, in Switzerland, we're doing quite well, and we may be ahead of a lot of countries with regard to the situation with the pandemic. What I realize is that New York and some other places in the United States still are going through quite a bit. And from your perspective, what have you seen in terms of how people are personally dealing, other than what you just described in general? But can you give us some more specifics about people who might be facing fear or uncertainty or I would say imbalance? Can I use that? Can I say that?
Right. I think in our country, in America, not much has been put in perspective. That's what we're dealing with, right? And there hasn't been much cohesive guidance about how to approach this. So again, we see really wide reactions, and a lot of people are, or I can say it this way, the people that are scared or afraid, a lot of it to me also is a lack of information of things that are possible. And so one of the things I'm trying to do is just speak to people about what is possible. Herbal protocols, saging yourself, clearing your environment, clearing your air, clearing your lungs, drinking tulsi, making sure that you're active, making sure your immune system is building up during this time. Because wearing a mask may be necessary, but it is not going to strengthen your immune system. Wearing a mask may also help other people to feel safe in your vicinity, but it is not going to empower your mind in any real way to release fear. So having those tools through how we live, how we eat, how we breathe, the herbs we take, the foods we eat, the regimens or the routines we take in our life, that's really where I come in as a yoga therapist, and believe that our lives, what we take in, it's like you eat what you believe. That's one way to say it. Your diet really is representative of your beliefs. And we're seeing that now in California, and I'm sure all over the place in incredible ways. There are people like bartering and sharing food and growing herbs for each other. That's amazing. And then there are other people that are incredibly cautious and haven't had much tools except stay away from everybody. So I think there are much better tools than that. And that's what I'm trying to share amongst people who are afraid and confused and and feeling unsure of how to act or react.
Mm-hmm. Well,
You know, none of us have answers, right?
Right,
Like
sure.
nobody has like the answer in the palm of the hand. We don't know right now. So in the process of uncertainty, there are such beautiful tools you can do for your own health, for your own emotional health, for your own spiritual health. And I can just say that, like, once people start getting that, the fear really lessens.
So can you make a connection between, there's so many things I want to ask. Can you make a connection between the fear and what we talked about, the diversity, or how diversity plays into the alleviating the fear? Now, we talked about it in not so exact as I'm putting it forth now, but people are dealing with fear on so many different levels in new ways that they haven't experienced before. I mean, there are people who are afraid to be in close contact with one another, or there are people who are, afraid to literally go outside, right? It's something that maybe we don't necessarily see on a regular basis, right? So when people go out, they sort of play as if they're not afraid, right? And then also touch on the diet part. I think when I was ill a couple of years ago, what I knew I had to do was come into balance. And part of what I did was I actually hired someone to come in and clean, right? Because I wasn't doing it. And I actually started to buy different herbs and educate myself on herbs. And I still, there's still information. There's a whole bunch of information that I still need to, be up on and be correct on. But can you outline, like, how does diversity play into fear, right? And different ways that you can sort of alleviate fear through either movement, yoga, food, mental thoughts, right? Is that too big? Too much of a...
That's pretty big. We'll start to enter that discussion. So we have to share that we have a very particular experience, because we grew up again in the arts. And the arts just tend to be, so we have to share that always, because I think it's so important to the discussion. So we grew up as a lot of arts kids do, or dancer kids, in a much more just diverse and tolerant and joyful community. And growing up on the East Coast, my view into culture was my view into life. Like they were not separate. My view into joy was my view into art and what we're now calling diversity, but that was just the way that we enjoyed living. So we're definitely coming from this perspective. And on the very positive side, what we're seeing right now is people coming together very purposefully, very kindly, and really stating their intention to create not just diversity, but like goodness for others. There's a co-op that's forming in LA. And since you asked, I'll just say it's called All Kind, and we're forming a co-op. And so that is the platform of having all kinds of people, all kinds of yoga, all kinds of approaches. We even spoke in our last meeting about now recording a lot of classes without video, so that if somebody wants to take yoga and doesn't have sight, they can participate. So there's a very broad, generous perspective of uplifting the community and bringing together all sorts of cultures, all sorts of people. That's sort of happening in the midst of all of this, again, anger and confusion. And the midst of it, there's been a population in the yoga community of like just diving right into the heart of creating something amazing. So that's my perspective, and it's, you know, I hope that perspective reaches out, but I realize that that's not at all how all people are feeling, and that's why we're creating it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we are the people that are stepping up to the plate. We have like a second chakra view, you could say, like we'll join, we'll create, we'll play, we'll dance with you, and we're just sort of happy to create our future.
Mm-hmm.
And then without that, there's been I was told when I got to LA that things are very separate because LA is huge.
Mm-hmm.
So I was told that like it's really hard to join communities because people are separate and they keep to their separate community. And so again, my perspective is not the normal perspective because I grew up, I love traveling. I've traveled all over India from top to bottom. I traveled as a dancer. You know, again, a lot of artists are traveling. So when I got to LA, I traveled.
Mm-hmm.
And I love traveling, not to just different parts of LA, but into different communities. So I think that the way that I navigate LA, and perhaps a lot of New Yorkers and a lot of world travelers, we navigate LA differently.
Mm-hmm.
And when we start to bring people into that, they're like, oh my, you know, wow. So I was calling myself a little bit of a nomad.
No, yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
I understand.
And we were talking about this before, but I really do see that people that haven't traveled, people that haven't put themselves or their kids or their families into situations that there's racial diversity, cultural diversity, spiritual diversity, religious diversity, psychological diversity, you know, that creates, in my understanding, that creates limitation and fear. I think that fear is having a reaction that what is unknown is separate from you.
Right.
You know, fear is having a reaction that what you don't know or what you're not familiar with is not yours, is separate, is perhaps scary. Of course, fear is scary. That's not rocket science, but like it's something that is not within your domain.
Yeah.
And the other perspective that a lot of artists share, that David and I were just talking about, is that everything is our domain.
Yes.
That the world is our domain, and the health and the wellness of the world is my domain.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a broad answer, but I've helped so many people to see that in so many ways. There was a neighbor, for some reason, she was walking her dog and we walked by in different directions. This just happened the other day. And we were both wearing masks, but we were both happy. And she just happened to say to me that her husband was so scared that he didn't think she should be out walking the dog. She just happened to ask me, like, what do you think? And I said, I think it's really important for us to be out and walking and strengthening our minds and our bodies and being in the air. She was like, oh, I'm going to go home and tell my husband that, you know. So it was just a small situation.
Right.
And then, yes, there are much larger discussions right now that are very open about how to create a world that is not based on racism. And I, like millions of people, I'm just so glad that's happening. I think it's great. It makes me feel energized to wake up into that world. Those are the discussions I want to see. That's the art I want to create. That's the world I want to be a part of creating. It's awful that we've had to struggle so hard to get here, but we are here. So to move into that, I'm just welcoming. And for the people that it's hard for, I think we can be compassionate. We can be extra compassionate, and then we can be compassionate again. That's all I can say. Does that start to take a crack at it?
Yeah, you know, look, there's a lot because we also had a conversation earlier, which is I didn't necessarily know that I knew I was different from, you know, the average, you know, and I understood that I was creative. It took me a long time for me to say to myself and to other people that I am an artist. Right? I never told people I was a dancer. I didn't tell my extended family. My extended family didn't know. I literally had a plan that was going to unfold on social media, and it's actually happened, right? So the dance company that I formed while I was here in Switzerland was the sort of the railroad tracks, right? And then when this whole situation happened, all of those roads or those tracks that had been, put on the ground were then used for this video interview series. All right, so some of the same things I was trying to do or present in dance, I now had a even stronger platform, because now everybody was home and they couldn't leave, and they're watching videos. So I said, okay, I can actually make a crack at this and present my community, the creators and the creatives, and to show how we are doing what we do. That is the idea, right? So you've done it beautifully. You're presenting what I saw many years ago. I'm very happy that this is sort of that we're having this conversation, right? What else did we talk about? We also talked about transformation.
Oh, wait. I want to put back into discussion. You mentioned the food, which is a gargantuan
That's right.
topic.
Yes.
But there's this inner and outer, right? There's this incredible yin and yang opportunity at this time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm working with many people healing from COVID right now, which I never saw coming.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of them all of the ones that have come to me are learning what self-care means. Mm-hmm. So this is an important topic that keeps coming into our threads of conversation. And I'll give you a succinct example, and then maybe we can open it back up again. Sure. But there was a woman that I spoke to a few days ago. She's trying to be quote unquote healthy now. And that's very new for her. And so she went out and she got a chia seed prepackaged sort of pudding for breakfast. And she'd been eating that for like 3 or 4 days because she thought that chia seeds were healthy. Mm-hmm. And so I asked her how the chia seeds made her feel, and she didn't know. Mm. Right? So there's a difference between our concept, like, oh, chia seeds are healthy, I should eat that because that is something I'm being told is healthy. Right. And our reaction, and paying attention to our senses and paying attention to our wisdom. And I hope this isn't too far out there, but I see that sort of feeding back to your larger scope of discussion, like really understanding our own wisdom, our own senses, who we are. Then the world can be diverse, right? I understand. If we're not paying, right, there's a correlation, right, between being not just healthy in yourself, but knowing yourself, paying attention to yourself, understanding what is unique about you. And then you can look out into the world and really be in awe of what you see, rather than just afraid of the other. Yeah. Right. So for this woman paying attention, and I knew it when I asked her, it was kind of a loaded question, but she's like, oh, I've been spacey, I've been foggy, I can't concentrate. I'm like, yeah, because chia seeds will do that to you.
well, I see it as, how do you say? You really have to, it's a huge lifestyle change. It's a huge lifestyle change, because what ended up happening for me is that I literally had to get with myself, have a meeting with myself, several meetings, many meetings. And that became the most important thing. That had to become the most important thing over every single thing else. Over, then you have, first you have God, then you. So literally having a meeting with yourself is literally like almost, having the meeting with God, and really hashing out, who are you? What are you here to do? What is your purpose? And if these things are different, then you got to deal with that. And you can't have fear that you're going to be perceived differently than what you think the society wants you to be, right? Or you really got to come to terms with that. And I think that was a huge step for me in terms of self-care and getting healthy, right? It was like, who am I? What is my purpose? What are my talents? What are my gifts? Because if you're really focusing on that, you're not gonna get in trouble. Now, this is a big jump, but I'm gonna say it. you're not going to have these weird encounters with nosy neighbors. This is just my opinion. You're with the police. And look, you can get stopped. You can get stopped on the highway. People, but I believe sometimes what's going on is that people are so off of who they are and what they're really supposed to be doing, and everybody's chasing the same thing, that you actually you're not who you are supposed to be in so many different ways, and then all of the conflict happens, right? That's when all the stuff starts to happen, and it doesn't do you any good. Like, I've been watching these Karen videos. The whole idea of the Karen sort of calling police and stuff. And I've watched them, and once you watch one of them, they all keep coming up, from the algorithm, right? So then you see every angle of the police stop, people reacting, overreacting, whatever. And then you say to yourself, there's something bigger going on than just what they're presenting in the video. And could it be the fact that we as people in this society are not being authentic from such a fundamental level that everything is off? That doesn't mean that these things aren't happening, right? Because they are, right. And we're watching them. But, people are being challenged in ways, and this is just not, Black people, white, it's everybody, right? So you get to see the angles, right, from different perspectives when you see the videos, when you see the stuff. Right. And there are ways that you can de-escalate. There's always a way to de-escalate. There's always a way to de-escalate. But sometimes that means that you may have to go off the beaten path in order to bring it back to some sort of level. So in other words, sometimes people, you get stopped by cops and they say, can I show, do you have your ID? If it's unlawful for him to ask a question, whatever it is, you may have to do something that's unlawful, considered not part of the protocol, in order to get your power back, right? And that's the kind of stuff that I think dance artists, people who are sort of always in that space, we become experts or have become experts at that because we do that every single day. We do that every single day. So cop stops you, you say, okay, the cop is stopping me. You're looking at him from not just from your perspective. It's not just you. You're looking at him in so many different ways. And this is controversial for me to say, but if you haven't had practice doing that, the words that are going to come out of your mouth aren't necessarily, they're not going to be in sync. It's just not going to be in sync. And it's called, I guess, in some respect, conflict resolution, right? Conflict resolution. It just doesn't happen on the stop. It also happens in schools. It happens at work. And the key is, let's say you're really angry with somebody. You have fear. And then you're like, you know what? I feel like never speaking to that person again after after what happened. But then you realize, you step away from it and you say, let me take a look at it from a different perspective. And can I shift for the sake of me? Can I shift this so that I can feel good about this person from this point on?
Right.
That's a real stuff.
Of course, some of those scenarios are horrible that are filmed, right? They're filming, white people being absolutely awful. But as you're speaking, it's interesting because some of the conflict resolution happens then in time, right? Like, so you're filming situations, the Karen videos, where some white woman is being totally obnoxious and there's like nothing you can do with her. There's nothing.
Right.
But because it is filmed, there's a community conflict resolution that sort of happens in time. And that's it was just very interesting in the perspective of what you were saying, where in a few cases, not all, the women actually go back and they realize, God, I was atrocious. That would be the best. But it's happening over time. Even if the people caught in that video, or the Black men caught in that video, usually, let's say they can't do a thing about it, but they're like maintaining their senses, their sense of self, their neutrality, their grace. All they have to do is sort of let time speak. And there's a, and in that way, I think hopefully a few of them are helpful. I don't know. Maybe that's too much to say. But there's, you know what I'm saying? There's like a community resolution that's happening, which is really nice.
Yeah. I think once again, like I'm looking at it, not just from, okay, what happened on its face.
Yes.
I'm looking at it from an energetic perspective. I'm looking at it from, like there's one video where guys just going bananas and there are like 10 cops approaching him. Young guy. And he's in front of his dorm. He's got dreads on, light complexion guy. And he's, I think, picking up trash. So he's picking up trash around, right? And he's got one of those sticks, right? So they come toward him and he's losing his cool because he's saying, look, I live here. And they're asking him and treating him as if he was, a criminal or someone. So he doesn't do a thing of what they ask him to do. Right. Because it's, violating his rights. But what I'm saying is, I'm thinking, man, isn't there another way? I'm thinking in my mind, isn't there another way? Isn't there another way? And part of it is, again, knowing how to talk to people, even when they're in the wrong. But David, that's what you just said. That's why there's a huge movement that's being distorted. There's a huge movement not to literally defund the police, but to refund the police, because you're sending in these police officers that are not trained to deal with these situations. That's the perspective, right? I think it's clear that they didn't know what was going on, and there was a huge gap. Right,
and
so they're moving toward him.
Coming from New Jersey, coming from New York, I'm sure you've seen 1,000 times, unfortunately, that the police get sent in and they have no understanding of how to handle a situation that they've been sent into probably multiple times. So that's, I think,
it's bananas. But let's say there are 10, 11 cops around you, and they're moving toward you. You understand what I'm saying? So in that moment, I'm thinking from like, what would I have done to resolve the fear? What would I have done? How would I, I'm bringing this up because
it's so scary. You made it real, like it's so scary. It's really scary. Because those, that's why we're calling not just for retraining the cops, but like starting again, revisioning what a police force looks like that is actually trained to de-escalate situations and trained to respond appropriately, because we don't we're not seeing that.
In this instance, he just had the thing that was picking up the, how you
and he's just picking up garbage, right?
Young guy. And they are surrounding him. And all I'm thinking is that because he was losing control of himself, they started to think that he wasn't who he was, even more so.
Right.
Do you understand what I'm saying? So the reason why I bring it in is, I think from a and you guys don't grill me just because I brought this up, but what I'm thinking is that there are ways. There's more than one way from each side, each vantage.
That's right. Yeah.
To de-escalate or to communicate. And look, thank God I grew up how I grew up. And this is why now I feel, maybe you said that I have sort of, I feel like I'm who I'm supposed to be, delivering the information that I'm supposed to deliver, and helping the people that I'm supposed to help. Right? That's how I feel. And, I can stand on that now. Before, I was like, it was, I didn't have that information. And that's, and because I am, I guess, who I am from the outside, and it's diversity. Yeah. And it's how
Right?
I see how we can help.
It's diversity, but it's also the exploration of yourself through time.
Yes.
Like we get both together. I just want to say one thing.
Yeah.
I had a conversation with a white man years ago at a Thanksgiving celebration,
Mm-hmm.
and he had very different views than me. This was years ago, and he was going on, and I let him go on for a while about how he's only had good experiences with the police, and
Mm-hmm.
why are people so angry at the police.
Right.
And I let him kind of talk himself up there, you know, and
Mm-hmm.
he said, the police have always been great to me. I've always had good experiences, and he was giving all these examples, and I just let him speak for a while. And then I said to him, what you just described, that is white privilege.
Right.
That's
Right.
exactly what it is, because
Mm-hmm.
other people do not have any of those experiences. And something really like pierced through to him at that moment. Like he actually got it.
What's amazing
Just wanted to
though,
mention that because he
it's
was
what's,
so seeing it from his perspective, and he was
yeah.
thinking it's a good perspective, right? But letting him kind of speak it through,
Mhm.
that's all I had to drop in. You just described exactly what is white privilege.
So let me, I don't want to veer off too much, but like the idea is, it's not everybody, well, when someone makes a general statement or an analysis as if everybody's equal, right? Now we're
Right.
supposed to be, like, in the eyes of God and in the natural law, our human rights, we all have them, and we're supposed to be equal, but all you have to do is look around and see inequality. I mean, inequality, it's not, and it's not, when you see it, it's not a bad thing, you know what I mean? Like, to see it, it exists, it's real. So when people say, well, I can deal with the police, well, why can't they?
Yes,
You say to
exactly.
yourself, are you
Right.
even watching what the heck is going on in the world? Can you delineate? Can you, parse? Can you see? Not everybody's going through the same thing that you're going through. And so that doesn't mean that they're wrong and you're right? It's just, that we're in an environment now that there's so many different factors, right? There's so many different, and look, now because of COVID and all of this stuff, now everybody's going through it, right? And this is
Yes.
the kind of information that I would like, this is what I would share with people. And look, what you've just told us about, fear and different foods we talked about earlier. This is all new information for people, I think, in a bigger collective way.
In
Like,
a
we
bigger
can talk
collective
about it
way.
from our
Yeah.
own smaller communities outside on the fringe, and we talked about it before, like, I didn't necessarily think that I was on the fringe, but now I can see where people that they would think that. Well, Dave's dancing, or
I think
Dave's
it's good. It's
living
good
in
to be on the
Switzerland.
fringe.
What?
I think it's good to be on the fringe. I was saying
Look,
to you before we started recording this,
yeah,
I'm a yogini. The yoginis were the rebels. The
mhm,
artists,
yeah,
some artists are trying to be rebels. Some artists they're just on the fringe because they're not seeing everything that's presented in the way it's being targeted to them.
right, yeah, I understand.
And right, and we're not able to, and that's beautiful. And there's a
Mm-hmm.
healing principle that is very dear to me, and it just goes like this: we can only perceive through our own senses.
Yeah.
We can only perceive through our own senses, and therefore the yogis throughout millennium have gone, oh wait, I can only perceive through my own senses. Let me purify my senses.
Mm-hmm.
Let
Mm-hmm.
me calibrate my senses. Let me sensitize my
Yeah.
senses.
Yeah.
That became the drive. And from a health perspective, it's very true. When we're sick, we can't smell. When we're sick, we can't see. When we're sick, we hear things and it gives us a headache.
Mm-hmm.
So from a health perspective, it's literally true that the clearer your senses are, the healthier you are.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're ever not feeling well, that's actually a beautiful way to respond to yourself and to start to heal yourself, to start to clear and clean and purify every sense until you're well. And then from the larger perspective, it goes to that massive question you gave me, that if our senses are really accurate, we start to be able to see subtleties. We start to be able to smell differences, see differences, but they become beautiful. You know, if my sense of smell is clean, the difference between sandalwood and frankincense is ecstatic. Right? If my senses are impure, I'm like, what, which one is that? You know, there's a confusion. So lack of sensitivity or lack of clarity in your senses is absolutely akin to confusion, distortion, and lack of perception.
There you go. There you go. So in other words, you beautifully presented what I've been trying to say by using these examples. Now, these are harsh examples. You guys don't come for me because I use these examples. I just remember this young kid going bananas, like he was mentally unstable, right? And the cops are moving, you know, like 10 of them, like one showed up and the next show, because they only see one way, right? And sometimes you know, what people don't understand is that, you know, and I don't necessarily like this, it's like, the cops are like, you know, they're armed, right? They're like they are armed forces, right? So that is a very hierarchical thing. So everybody's taking their cue from the leader in the pack, right? And part of your job, or part of everyone's job, is to figure out who the leader is in the pack. Like if you're in that situation, and you have your wits about you and your senses about you, you're trying to figure out who you should be talking to, right? And we can bring it down a couple of notches. Even let's say when you're at work, right? When you're at work and there's a misunderstanding, right? What has been interesting for me is that I do this on a regular, and I've noticed that just before we had the conversation, there have been many times where people misperceive what I'm doing, and they kind of say, oh, he's trying to do this, or he's trying to get ahead, and we got to knock him down, and we've got to stop him. What I've tried to stand in is that I want to make sure that everybody is clear. I want to make sure that we all do well, right? I want to make sure that we're all successful, right? Because if we're only successful and you guys are not, then this isn't going to work, right? We're not going to get to this innovative product that we're trying to present, right? So it's to move that fear out. And sometimes I think the people are they're looking at me like, how is he doing what he's doing? Like, I was mad at him yesterday. And now we're cool, you know, we're cool. But it doesn't, in the beginning, it was tough because they didn't necessarily know my style. Like, I just want everybody to be clear. And it doesn't mean, just because I'm annoyed with you, doesn't mean I'm going to withhold information from you. You know, because I'm annoyed. Like, we all got to do well. We all have to do well. So I'm going to give you all the information you need. If it's something that I think that you need to see, I'm going to give it to you. I'm not going to withhold it.
Right.
If somebody else in the company sends me something and I know it's going to help you, thus help me in the group, it's going directly to you. Right. In the beginning, people did not like that at all. Because
it's very hard for other people to deal with sometimes, because now I'm totally going to sound like a yoga teacher, but that's the definition of a higher chakra perspective.
I see.
Like, you're doing what is evolutionary.
Yeah.
What's going to come first is what is evolutionary.
Yes.
It's not important, or it's not even interesting to do what's devolutionary. The devolutionary can be power struggles, can be office politics, all that stuff. If you're in that higher chakra perspective, it's just not interesting. It doesn't use up any of your energy. It's more interesting to be evolutionary. And that's an amazing world. His Holiness the Dalai Lama has been on Tibet TV Live quite a bit, just speaking about kindness and compassion and how to move forward. And you really feel in His Holiness that total perspective, you know, to beyond mastery, that perspective of what creates help, what creates kindness, what creates goodness, what is going to move us into less limitation and more awareness, right? And that perspective can be very challenging for people.
Well, it's funny because
that again, we're talking about fear that can actually bring up fear in people. It's
well,
very hard.
Let me tell you, when I had my evaluation or meeting, whatever, my manager then said, "Oh, we made it. We made it." Something about we made it. And I was like, what is she talking about? And then she says, but David, it was kind of hard. It was hard. Like, I'm thinking, what is she talking? Like, I kind of knew at that point because we never really specifically talked about what you and I are talking about now. She just sort of said it like, David, like we made it. Okay, yeah, we made it. But it was really hard. It was really hard. That's all she kept saying. It was really hard. So in other words, she understood at some level what I was doing. Like sometimes she would send a note, or somebody would send a note and I would forward it with her name on it. She couldn't stand it. Didn't like it. Didn't like that I was putting her name on the other stuff and forwarding it to people. Right? But I was like, look, that person needs to see the chain of thought. Right? And if I just say it, they're not going to have an understanding. And literally tomorrow, you're going to have to ask that person, or next month, you're going to have to ask that person for a favor, right? Based on maybe something else, or even the point that I'm just sending you, right? So why are you getting mad? You know, so in other words, we're all going to win on this. You got to trust that I'm going to do the right thing. Right.
And this is why we talk about grounding, literally, right? This is why we talk about grounding. Those people that can't get off the ground, they need the creative, they need the burst of energy, they need the tools to ascend.
Yes.
But for those of us that are very happy to ascend, we have to do what you just said. You constantly have to create a ground, right? Like a note with somebody's name on it. You have to really be in the habit of grounding yourself and grounding situations around you. Amazing. And so we see the opposite, like, I'm sort of changing the subject, but I'm not changing the subject, right? Like teaching a lot of very mystic yoga, I had to fully realize that for some people, they don't have the transcendental approach. They don't have the artistic or the blissful or whatever. They don't have the higher approach. And for them to have the tools, like this is what you do. This is how you step into your heart and out of your mind. Those tools are incredible that we have in yoga. But for the people that have lived what we call higher chakra, expansive, huge thinkers, huge dreamers, huge creators, huge visionaries, for those people that are already like up and out, to have the tools to ground.
Yeah, sure.
Right? To have the tools to come back to this moment in your ground, in your bones, are amazing. So sometimes we need like the opposite things simultaneously from an energetic and psychological perspective. And a lot of the tools that help one person to ascend will help the other person to ground. It's interesting. It's like the same method, right?
Sometimes
we'll tether one person.
Sometimes you're doing it simultaneously. You're doing it simultaneously. So if you're in a group, let's say even when we'll go to choreography, right? When you're choreographing with a group, that's essentially what you are doing when you're creating a piece, right? So when I go to work, I'm choreographing. People don't know it, right? Because they can't make the leap. They need to see the stage and dancers with tights and this and that. Then it's dance. But we're at work and, there's computers and this and that. So that's that. But I see it as all one, and the movement of people through systems, right? And sometimes those systems change like that. That's the whole idea. It's like, all of a sudden we're here and then we changed and we're in another space and another time and another, right? And that's what's happening. But not everybody is down with that, right? Not everybody understands that. So when you forward their email, and they see their name or you write their name, they're going bananas, right? Because maybe they feel a lack of control, right, of information, and they want to be in control of what gets put out there with their name on it.
That's right. That's why I'm so excited to be part of co-ops right now, right? Because it's not about my name or somebody else's name. It's about what we create together. So that perspective is so interesting to me personally, and then to create that right now, you know, to be, be centered again in what is evolutionary for a project.
Yeah.
It's
So
just to me, it's very beautiful to create that. And again, being part of creating that in the yoga community, to me means we're like taking it to the higher level. We're really creating businesses now around our belief systems.
But that's what I think it should be from the very beginning. And
Yes.
that's one of the reasons why I had issues with dance. Now, I want to get to your co-op, but what I started to see was like, why isn't dance more like a business, right? Because we're doing things to help, but we don't have a tangible product that people can see. It's all kind of messed up. The co-op now, that's even a cleaner, not cleaner, but a more, it's tangible. People can see that. So it's a similar thing where you're dancing, but it's a co-op, right? And now
exactly.
It's
right.
the same thing. It's the same thing.
You're in a company, it has to be a co-op, right? And the companies that were the hardest to work with were the companies where people's personalities and egos and need for attention was so dominant to their experience of developing a piece or performance that it just kept getting in the way. You're just bumping into it over and over. I remember dancing for choreographers who would teach us could be like a 40-minute piece and then throw all that work out. They're like, no, let's let that go. Let's do something else. You just have to let it go. You know, in the best case scenario, or with that perspective, you're actually learning that in dance, right?
Well,
like
you're learning how
movement,
to move
right?
it out.
Maybe it's gone the next second, right?
Yeah. Frustrating.
You don't own your own movement. You don't. It's like we say in yoga, like you don't own your own breath. You don't own your own movement. Maybe it gets created and it gets let go.
Well, no. Look, I feel you on that one, but with regard, let's say if there's a time constraint and they do it the day before the actual show, you still are learning. You're learning, but you know what I'm saying, right? You know what I'm saying? Like I'm okay with throwing stuff out, but don't do it a week before the show.
Oh, I probably had it like an hour before the show. Changing things around.
Even in that, you still learn something, right? Like the more that you're in that space, the better you're going to be as a performer, the better you're going to be in other words, you need that stress test. You need that for anything to get better, right? So like I said, I would not have been able to create this interview series without all of the other hard stuff.
But that goes back to what you were saying before, that you can always have how can I say, always have compassion for people that have a hard time with it, but working towards extreme flexibility of mind, not just of body, but of mind, that's part of the process. So we're seeing when people have no flexibility of mind, that can be extremely dangerous, literally. But where I don't always enjoy the process, I'm not going to, say I always love going through the process, but I do love being in the mode of working on flexibility of mind. And I hope my body is flexible, but more than that, I hope my being is flexible. It's a hard process.
It's serious work. Let me ask you a question, then we'll go back to your co-op because I want to know more about that. What do you think it's going to take for people to really understand what we've just talked about on a much bigger level? I mean, because we had some things even before, but even now, what you just said, being flexible and being, just being open and being willing, right? And you talked about how the fear you know, let's say when you like to artists travel and experience lots of different cultures, this is how you were, you know, were raised, this is how you've always been. And when people say, oh, now you have to create diversity, you kind of say to yourself, but this is what I've been doing for a long time. This is not new. This is not a new thing, right? But how come it's seen as new? How come for a lot of people it's still seen as far off? And, you know, what do you think it's going to take for people to really understand?
I wish I could answer that question. You know,
Yeah.
the only way I can answer that question is to say, like, that I'm willing to try in every way that it takes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't have the answers. I wish I did. I can say in general again that I think that travel is really important to people. Being being in America can feel isolating, as you know.
Yeah.
So having different experiences in different cultures and different places, I think, is huge. And then I do believe in the practices of yoga in the moment, that when your breath changes, when you are asked to regulate your own energy, your own rhythm, your own mind, when you're asked to do that, there's a fundamental transformation into a different kind of person.
Mm-hmm.
I do believe in yoga that deeply,
Mm-hmm.
that it gives you the tools to change from having a singular perspective or a rigid experience into a flexible perspective and a self-knowing experience.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So I profoundly believe in that, and that's why I've taught that for 30 years. And it doesn't have to be like a complicated kriya or series. It can just literally be the action of listening to your breath,
Mm-hmm.
while hearing your breath, while sensing your energy. You know, it can just be something very small.
Mm-hmm.
But when all of the techniques of yoga come together, there's a transformation.
Sure.
The way you're seeing, the way you're holding your fingers, the way you're moving in rhythm with your body, the way you're hearing your breath, and the way you're holding your physical vehicle. When these things come together, and I know I said a lot, but there's that technique in yoga, when these things come together, there is a different now. There's a new breath that comes, a new complete breath or perspective that comes in the next moment. And I see it with people healing. All of a sudden, they're not so closed, they're not so tight, they're not so scared. And then we see it in larger ways, like we're starting to talk about today, people that have had a perspective of being separate or alone or judging others, or putting others in a derogatory category in any way, that disappears as you know yourself. It just doesn't work anymore. So I still don't know that answers the question, but I can say that, like, I'm grateful to the practices of yoga, because I think they bring about either that change in those that have been restricted, or the ability to live in a world that is flexible and fluid and compassionate.
Mm.
Like, I don't know, I can't say anymore,
Wow.
but
Wow.
yeah.
Well, you said a lot. You said a lot. With regard to your co-op, at what stage are you guys with regard?
It's called All Kind, and we're literally just forming in LA right now. Last week we figured out the name. It's called All Kind.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, the stage is we just got the name, are figuring out what resources to use, are in the very first stages of putting together videos that let our purpose be known. And we're going to ask for some funding, and I'm just really happy to be a part of it.
Well,
it came out of a tough situation. I won't even go into that, but it came out of a tough situation.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's nice to see that.
Yeah, look, I think it's great. I never was someone that was super into co-ops. Like I'd never been around people that said, "Hey, let's do it," right? But I will say this.
But you just said a dance company is like a co-op.
It is. Like,
I
so
think
I
when
did
a dance
that, right?
company functions well, it functions as a co-op.
It does.
And when a dance company is dysfunctional, which we've seen
a lot,
then a dysfunctional dance company ceases to act like a co-op. That's
right.
my experience.
Yeah. I mean, because let's say, for example, even in dance, you come in with the program and you're asking people to do things and they're looking at you like, why do I have to do that? I remember
Yeah.
one of the first pieces that I did on someone who I would consider professional, she wouldn't do the choreography because she just was like, what is that?
Oh, I'm
What is
sorry,
that?
David.
What is that? So you say to yourself,
Oh no.
hey, look, you signed up for this. And look, there's a way to even present what you've learned from somebody, right?
Yes.
So for example, they give you something, you say, okay, well, I don't know about that, but you do it in a way that has intention, that is respectful, and you should know how to do that through movement, right? They
Yes.
will know instantly, oh, this person's committed, right? You don't have to convince that person. They may not know what they want, but if you're committed to whatever they're presenting or putting out there in terms of movement, because that's a language in and of itself, you can get the upper hand. You can get control. You don't have to give up your power when you go into a dance situation.
I learned this past year there's literally a teaching in an ancient text of Ayurveda that says you should not move. It basically translates to you should not move in a clumsy or awkward way. And when we read this, we had to really pause and think about what that meant.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I was thinking of my experience as a dancer, of sort of what you just alluded to, of being given choreography that maybe I didn't get it, maybe I didn't like it, maybe, I don't know, maybe I had 1,000 things about it. But my job wasn't to keep it in that domain of unacceptable or non-approachable, or again, something that I get to reject. My job was literally to take it into my mind, body, being, senses and present it in a way that was authentic.
There you go.
And so when I thought about that Ayurvedic teaching through that lens, I thought that is so interesting. What is the transmutation then of being responsible for your own body, being responsible for your own movements in such a way that you don't create in the world clunky, inauthentic ways of moving. And I thought that one little sentence then had so many implications. You know, the translation was a little weird, and even in the translation, but it's really something to think about, that how you move in your body, which is essentially asana, right? The posture that your body in should not be inauthentic to you.
And look, I'm going to say something very controversial again. I think that you and other people like you and me, we could be teaching cops movement, right?
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
it's a huge thing, because I guess maybe what I was doing with those videos was watching them move, right? Even how they come up to
their body language is so crazy
whack.
in those videos.
It's whack, right?
They're,
It's just off.
right.
It's off.
That's so true. They're coming in being menacing. They're not
That's
coming
right.
in being helpful. And I think that's what people are reacting to. They're coming
That's
in
right.
with, we say a lot of ego, but you're right. It's their movement. They're moving in a menacing, pack-like, predatory way towards some poor guy that's picking up trash. Like, oh my God.
Yeah, that's what it is. And I think I was watching it over and over again because literally I was processing it through that. Now, even what you've just said in this last, in your last statement, what I visualized was you teaching in front of a group of cops, because I think, just based on what I see in the videos, they're not getting any of this information. They don't have any of this information. And I'll give you another thing, like let's say on LinkedIn.
Yeah, everybody's holding their breath, right? Like, it's not a situation where prana is moving, where chi is moving.
No.
It's a situation where, like, you watch the video and you hold your breath. So I'm sure
right.
they're not.
That's right. That's right. So there's another thing that happened, or I saw on LinkedIn, where somebody from the Wharton School at Penn, University of Pennsylvania, received the President's Prize for Innovation. And they did some sort of teaching inner city kids how to do improv, right? And I've gone through this exercise at work, so I kind of understand. It's a little, it's a little out there, but there's a guy who's from another generation, and he says, this is malarkey, or this is crap, or whatever. He says, all they need is math, science, reading comprehension and such and such. That's the key. And, I looked at that and I said, wow, what he doesn't understand is that we're not saying that they don't need those things, because people need hard skills. But what we're trying to develop, or what people are trying to develop, is the soft skills, because I think in this day and age, the soft skills are becoming just as important, if not more important than the hard skills. Right?
Yes.
You still need to know all that hard stuff, but we're living in such a complex world where if we don't have those soft skills, we could make a mistake that would end up killing us.
Right.
And that is what I see is happening. What I see is happening now. That we don't have the tools to de-escalate, and we think it's the job of the police to do everything, and it really is, right? But they don't know, right? So you got to go into it, and you guys don't kill me because I'm saying this. You got to go into it thinking that they don't know what they're doing, even if they do, and you can't crucify them because they don't know, right? You can't do it, and it happens on every level. Not on every level, not just with cops, but at the workplace, at church, people have authority by title, but they don't necessarily know what they're doing, particularly now in this day and age. When all of these things and shifts and changes, people have jobs they shouldn't have. People are doing things or living certain ways that they shouldn't be living. And it affects everything. It affects everything. That's how I see it. So look, I mean,
well, that's again part of the hugeness of the problem on so many levels, that authority is not competency. And the gap has gotten wider and wider in so many fields. Authority is not competency. Yeah,
it isn't.
I think you're right. We can expect a basic level of competency, which is again why I think people are calling for the recreation of the police force, because the gap has gotten worse and worse. Those people that are standing there that saying, "Oh, it's less, it's better, it's less dangerous than it used to be for people of color." No, that's not what we're seeing.
No.
We're not seeing that.
No,
Witness does not bear that.
In another way, it's almost like this, and we talked about this before. Remember, we talked about what happened to Jewish people, World War I, World War II, and then everyone moving in different places, movement out of Europe to different. What I believe, and why I believe New York was in a renaissance when we were there and we experienced it, was that the gap that existed because of the change and because of war started to close, but it was because of everyone in the community's effort to make sure that those gaps were closed. That was done through individual effort and achievement, but also community effort and achievement, right? Now we're being presented with a new view of what community looks like in America. So now we have to then start to close those gaps that have been left.
But it's like healing a wound, right?
Yes.
A lot of people, my parents worked really hard to heal the wound, but the wound was still open. Now we're trying to close the wound even further. Like, we hope we can do it, but we don't know. But we're trying to close. It's not just a gap, right? Close the wound,
right?
And heal the wound. So that's what we're in the process of, and it can be extremely painful and extremely hard. But if you're watching it, right? If you're watching it through time, you're like, oh, it's healing. The wound is healing. That gap is closing. Thank God,
Is there anything else you want to say in terms of what we've just talked about and what you're up to?
My God, David, we talk about everything simultaneously. So I just hope for those. Thank you for watching. Thank you for watching. Thank you for liking. Thank you for sharing. And I hope that those of you that are watching have appreciated that David and I can just launch into a conversation in about a split second and talk about as many things as are on our hearts and minds simultaneously. Yeah. But I'm
Thank
happy
you.
to be in contact with you, and I'm happy to be part of this incredible project that you're creating.
Yeah,
Yeah.
look, thank
David
you.
France TV, it's cool.
Yeah, look, I
Yeah.
mean, thank you. I mean, you're one of the, like I said before, you're one of the people that I was like, hey, she's doing something. And I got to figure out, you know, not 100%, but she's doing something that I need to know about. I think that was what was in my mind back then.
Right.
She's doing something I need to know about.
Right.
Let me go over to her house.
I think right now, like amidst of the craziness,
Uh-huh.
I want to use all of my resources for healing. When I work with people, you know,
Mhm.
individually, and then as you said, as a community, as a country, I should say, as a town, LA is a big town, as a
Mhm.
community and as a country, I'm trying to use all of my resources. And I feel very blessed that in yoga therapy, I have so many different resources I can call on.
Sure.
So whatever resources each individual needs, that's what I'm trying to bring
Wow.
to the plate.
Well,
Yeah,
look,
so that's all I'll say about that.
let us know, like when I'm gonna upload this as soon as we finish. May take a couple hours or so. But let me know what people say about this. This video is what we covered. I feel
Oh
extremely
my
positive
gosh.
about
Yeah.
what we talked about, and I'm really excited to upload it and give it a title and description and
Good
whatnot,
luck with that.
and then tell people look, listen to what this, you know, she's saying, you know, listen, you know, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, we can put some resources too in the links as you put it out there.
Okay.
Resources to good Ayurveda, resources to co-ops. We can see if the discussion continues a little bit.
Okay. Well, send me what you think I should put in terms of those links,
I shall and I will.
and I'll put them
Thank
in.
you.
All right. Thank you.
Blessings,
Have a great rest of your day and evening. Okay.
I will. Have a great day or a great evening where you are. And I look
Uh-huh.
forward to the next time. I look forward to seeing more of what you've put out with other
Yeah.
discussions.
Yeah.
Jai.
Look. All right.
Blessings.
Take
Shanti
care of
Om.
yourself. Bye
Bye,
bye.
David.
Bye bye.